Thanks again for hopping on, Hannah. Pumped to have you here. So, I know we talked a little bit before the show, but just kind of wanted to, for everyone listening, get a sense for what got you into soccer, where you from, kind of like what made you grow your love for the game when you were younger.
Yeah, I'm from Seattle, Washington. Both my parents played collegiate sports, so I played every sport you could imagine growing up: basketball, soccer, tennis, literally every single sport. And so I played soccer from probably when I was 5, and I just kept playing, and I played basketball and lacrosse through high school, and soccer was the one that I was really interested in playing in college, and I felt that I was best at. And so I kept going with that. And COVID was hitting during my sophomore year of high school, so the recruiting process was a little hard. I ended up going to an ID camp at USC, which is in California, and doing well. And then I committed there, and my career kind of just went from there a little bit. But I started pretty young, but I didn't just play soccer, which is, I think, a big reason why I've been as successful as I am right now, is because I have that multidimensional.
Actually, I did want to go deeper on that for a second. A big topic from what we've seen for parents is
Yeah.
nowadays, especially kids that specialize in sports too early, and why it's not a good thing. And I'm on the side of I agree it's not a good thing, but why do you think, just from your experience and like making it this far, why do you think playing so many sports early on helped you become a better athlete in the long run?
Yeah, I think there's a multitude of different reasons. I think one, injury prevention is really big. I think when you play one sport, you're working the same muscles every day. I think that's why we've seen a lot of ACL injuries, at least in the women's side of the game, like younger. Because I never saw an ACL tear when I was in club, and in college, you see them all the time now. Along with like the injury part, I just think it kind of makes you appreciate your sport more. College was the first time I just played soccer, and I think you grow to love it more and more the more you play. But that's after playing different sports and maybe learning what you like and don't like. And then the last part, I'm a goalie, so I think playing basketball and lacrosse and other hand-eye coordination sports really helped me grow in that aspect of being a goalie. I played baseball also, so like the tracking portion of the ball, crosses, is something that is one of my strengths, and that really comes from playing other sports. I didn't learn that from soccer. I learned that from like basketball and baseball and all that type of stuff. So I think there's a lot of reasons, but those are three would probably be my main ones.
I think most parents would agree. I guess what's your, before we get on to your career and stuff, what's your answer to parents who say, I understand that, but if, take someone like you, for instance, probably super talented, both parents played in college. If you still want to give your kid an advantage early on with one sport, like what's the healthiest way to do it nowadays? Like get maybe training for one sport and then just kind of like play the others recreationally, or like how
Yeah.
would you go about that if they really do love soccer, but parents know that playing multiple sports is good for you?
Yeah, I would say I started seriously training, like very individual training, when I was probably seventh or eighth grade. So I think a lot later than people start now. But I never felt. I think some people peak early on, and you want to be at the part where you peak right before, like you have two peaks kind of. You want to peak right before you go to college, and then you want to grow when you go to college also. So I think that individual training before you go to college and like starting maybe late middle school would be a good idea. But I think there's a lot of burnout that happens when you start individual training way too early. And you have the sense of the parents pushing it from their side instead of like the internal love of the sport from the kid's perspective. So I think there are pros and cons to starting early and pros and cons to starting later. But I would say like seventh, eighth grade, like seriously training would be a good idea, because by then you probably know if you want to play in college or not. And you
Yeah.
can keep playing other sports recreationally on the side.
Okay, I like that. I guess going back to your journey, I think you said you went to USC first, right? And then
Hmm.
Nova. Okay. So what about the
Yeah.
college recruiting process? I know a lot of parents always want to hear about that from like current college athletes. What was that like for you through the ID camps? I'm sure it was like a
Yeah.
stressful but maybe fun process. But what was it like?
Yeah, I it was pretty difficult for me at least. I didn't really I think I've grown a lot more in college than I had in high school, so I was a little bit of a late bloomer when it came to like the goalkeeping position. So I found it harder to get recruited. It was also COVID hit my sophomore year, so there were not a lot of ID camps, and sophomore year is like your main recruiting
Okay.
time. So I went to like three ID camps. I think my junior year summer, I went to Penn, Brown in July, and then I went to USC in August, because I had the coach was like, "Come on out. Like, there's no reason you shouldn't come out. Whatever." I didn't have a lot of traction at least, and then I did really well at the ID camp in USC, and they were like, "You're pretty similar to the level of the goalies we have now. Like, we'd love to have you on. We can't give you money," which was not something I was super worried about. I kind of just wanted to get my foot in the door and then go from there. And so that's kind of what I did. And then the transfer process is something else, but like the original recruiting process was pretty difficult. I would like, if I had any advice, I would just say be incredibly consistent with your communication, whether that's like sending out things before tournaments or I used to cold call coaches and stuff with their phone number, which doesn't always work, but then you send them a voicemail and you're on their radar. So that's always good. And I think just using your connections, one of the reasons I was able to go to the camp at USC is because I knew someone who was committed there, and then I was able to contact the coach that way. So it was the connection piece is super helpful.
For the connection piece, so for parents, they know the kids in fifth, sixth grade, they know they want their kid to play in college. How do you kind of build up those connections if your parents either didn't play in college or you're not like super tapped into it? Do you have to get on like an elite club team and like go up the club ranks? Like I know soccer is one of those sports where so many kids play it and it's so hard to move up the ladder. But like, what would your rec be maybe for middle schoolers who want to start taking that next step to then get recruited? Because they get, like you said, you can't just wake up as a junior in college or high school and be like, I want to play at USC. Like it starts young, but how do you build up to that?
Yeah, I think being on a club team where the coach has a lot of connections is very helpful. My junior year of high school, I played on Crossfire ECNL, and my head coach at the time was very, very well connected. She played at Portland, and so she knew a lot of other coaches, and so that was a lot of the way that I started communication with other coaches. I think also your individual trainers are very helpful, especially if they're soccer specific. So I think just like building the contacts you have, not like always reaching out too much, but just knowing they're there and maybe having the coaches like put you on the other coaches' radar, like college coaches, so they know you're there. Maybe they obviously can't talk to you when you're like in 8th grade or whatever, but they know your level and they know your graduation year and stuff like that.
I gotta say, but before we really get to like your college career, you mentioned that you would cold call the parent, cold call the parents. You would cold call the coaches yourself as a high school kid, or were your parents cold calling? Because I think parents.
No, I did all my recruiting stuff myself. Obviously, my parents helped me like construct emails and all that stuff, but I think it's an incredibly useful skill to learn. I also think it's really hard to put yourself out there like that because everyone's going to get rejected at some point. But I think it really set me up well for when I got to college and being able to ask for advice, ask what I need to do better, always go into the office and all those things. I didn't do the cold calls all the time, but if it was a school I was really, really interested in, I would cold call, leave a voicemail, and then work my way from there.
That's awesome. I've honestly never heard. Maybe I missed the boat on that, but I've never heard of a high school kid cold calling college coaches. That's so cool because it's just like it's maximum effort to get to where you want to be. I think a lot of kids expect
Yeah.
like if I'm good, the coach will find me. But no matter how good you are, there's like probably 10 kids more talented than you. So if you
Yeah.
if you put yourself out there, I think coaches will appreciate that. That's really cool. Okay, and I guess for parents, before we get to the coaching stuff, you playing in college, so do you think it's all it's cracked up to be playing college sports? Or like, what should kids nowadays who want to go play D1 soccer? What should kids and parents know? Like, what's it really about when you get there?
It's not for everyone. I really enjoy it. I'm an incredibly competitive person, and so I do enjoy showing up every day and like getting better and getting to compete with my teammates and all those things. But it is a full-time job. Like you go to class, you go to practice, you do homework and you go to bed. There's not a lot of time for a social life, at least when you're in season like in the fall. But if it's something that you really enjoy and you want to do, I would say go for it. But it's definitely not like there's sacrifices you need to make in order to be successful in your sport. And I think that if you're okay with that, then college sport is 100% the thing for you.
What are some of the biggest sacrifices you think it's social life, or do you have to stack like sometimes picking certain classes like what you really want to do academically in college, or do you have time for all that? Because there's always academics, athletics, and social. So is it kind of like picking two out of the three? Is that how you feel?
Yeah, I think you definitely have to sacrifice with classes. I think being a Division 1 athlete, you don't have that much time on your hands. And so the major you pick is definitely needs to be in correlation with how much free time you have and how much time you have to study and if you're traveling all the time and all those things. Because being, say, like a bio major or science major, any of those things, you have to study a lot. and it's a lot of memorization. Things like on that realm are super difficult to do. So I think you do have to make sacrifices with that type of thing. And I think a social life is definitely something you have to make a sacrifice for. You end up being incredibly close to your teammates, so that is somewhat of your social life, but it also depends on what team you're on. Some teams are more lenient than others, but most of the time you are kind of eating, sleeping, and breathing soccer. So
Yeah, I know my wife always said I don't think she had too many friends outside of soccer, and like everyone she knew, still her closest friends were even from growing up, high school, club, college. It's all just soccer people because she was a
yeah.
lifer, so I'm sure it's the same way. I guess beyond playing, so obviously you're an Athletes Untapped coach. You're giving your time back to help mentor younger players to get better and also improve their skills. What made you want to start doing this, and like having gone, I guess, through the whole process? What do you really try to get across to kids when you coach them one on one? Like, I guess what are the biggest things you want them to know that you've gone through that can help them as they get better?
Yeah, honestly, one of the biggest things I bring up to parents is the multi-sport thing. Especially with goalies that I train, I'm always like, do they play basketball? Do they play another sport? Because it really does help your development as an athlete. With the coaching part of it, I honestly got into it because I was a reference from someone else, and I had coached other kids on the side, but having an actual app to do it was a lot easier, and I kind of wanted like a side gig at school because it's always nice to like make connections, but also have somewhat of a job at the same time. I find it incredibly fulfilling to do because all these kids potentially want to play in college or trying to move up their club levels, and it's a small thing that you can do to help them improve. But I also think teaching others helps me learn more about my position and how like specific techniques and fundamentals of the sport. So it aids me as well as it aids the kids I'm training.
That's really cool. What's one of the like the better stories you have for training? Is there any kid in particular who you've helped like actually make that next club team, or kids that have like gone on to play in college? I know you're still in college, so maybe not.
Most of the kids I train are like pretty young.
Okay.
I would say like maybe 9 to 12. So most of them are still like developing in their club levels. And I just left for the summer, so I'm not really able to train in the fall, which is kind of difficult. At least like in the spring, I saw a lot of improvements from multiple of the people I was training. Just even if it's like, oh, you can now like play quickly with two touch, or you can play one touch, or you can play with your left foot. I think a lot of the things when you're younger is a lot of repetition, and so it was pretty cool to see even like small, minute changes when I was training them.
And what about logistically as a coach? Because we get a lot of people, and I'm sure people listening to this will want to know if they want to become an Athletes Untapped coach or just get into coaching in general. What are some of the things that set you up well for success? Like, do you think you need a ton of equipment or not really? Or do you have like one set location that you like training at? Or do you like to go where the parent is to be flexible? What's like the business ops side of it that's helped you succeed when working with clients?
Yeah, you definitely need gear, obviously. I think that's a big thing. I think being able to provide gear for your client is a big deal. I think it shows a more professional side of it. In addition to that, I don't have a car, so I usually have one place that I train and I just have my clients go there, which I find to be a lot easier because it's much more consistent, and then you can do trainings back to back to back and all those things. And I think just consistency with communication is always helpful, making sure that your client knows your schedule, and if you can't make something work, you just have to be honest about it. So
That's fair. And when it comes to, I guess, like off-season training, or maybe even training like around your lessons, what do you usually advise athletes to do when they're not working with you? Because obviously, I mean, it rarely happens where a parent trains with the coach like every single day. So if you're meeting with a kid once a week, how do you help them improve for the other 6 days before they come see you again?
yeah, I think a lot of it's club practices, like making sure that they're focusing on specific things during their club practices. Because I don't like to like tell my clients to go and all individually train all the time because I think that like can contribute to burnout. And so most of the time, I like when I'm talking to my clients or the kids that I train, I'm like, you should. These are maybe two things you should focus on when you're doing or practicing with your club team. Super easy, super simple things. Maybe like work on taking your touch forward out of your feet so you're not stuck, or check your shoulder before the ball gets to you if you're a midfielder or something. I also train goalies, which I think the goalie position's a little different. There's a lot of drills that I do with my clients that they can also do at home and practice like on their own, even if it's like throwing the ball against the wall, throwing a tennis ball against the wall. There's a lot of different things that you can do. And so I try and, at least with the goalie position, give them things that they can do on their own, because I think that position you do have to put a lot of time into it to be successful.
I know for goalies in particular, not that I was one, but my wife always told me I think that position's probably the most like mentally challenging in a game. It's like you're kind of on an island by yourself. Just in terms of the mental preparation and mental training, what goes into that for goalies, and like what should upcoming athletes know? Like obviously the physical side you have to have. I'm sure you have to get like the soccer skills down too, but more than anything else, how do you prepare mentally for a big game? And I guess like same thing when you're training a goalie. What are the bigger like mental tasks or hurdles that you try to help them overcome?
Yeah, I think a big thing is that failure is just a part of the position. Like you're never going to not get scored on. Like that's eventually going to happen. And so being okay with failure, I think is a big thing, and being able to like flip your switch really quick and be like, okay, next one. It's a difficult position because like you make one mistake and it's ultimately like you can lose the game for your team. It obviously has to go through all the other players, so it's not just like a blame game. But I also think that there's a lot of pressure that gets put on your shoulders as like the last line of defense. So I think building that confidence with you as a player, and then being able to be like, okay, I know I'm good, I know I can do these things, and if I make a mistake, that's okay. I just have to learn from it and move forward. And I will get scored on. That's just the way it works, unfortunately. So being able to like be like, okay, I know what I need to fix for that, and now I'm gonna focus on the game.
What about game day routines? I know a lot of we hear a lot of comments about that from parents and athletes. Like I feel like I prepared as much as I could before with training, but like day of, how do I make sure that I get ready properly for a big game? Do you have any tips for athletes on stuff you do?
Yeah, I think hydration, nutrition is a big one. Making sure that you're eating a full meal and a snack before the game, like spacing it out. We always get told you should be eating a full meal 4 hours before, and then you should be having a like carb dense snack 2 hours before, and then you should be having something again. I think making sure that you've done everything you can so you can perform to your best is super important. So those two things I would say are keys to success. I also think you have to know yourself a little bit. I'm not someone who really likes to get super pumped up before games because then I get frantic. So I'm more in the like stay relaxed, stay loose type of vibe, and not everyone's like that. I think you have to find what works for you. But there are definitely, like, I'm very superstitious, so there's things I do every game that help calm my nerves. I think as kids keep playing the sport, you kind of have to figure out what works best for you and then build on that.
That makes sense. Yeah, because I know a lot of kids, as they get older, it seems like when you're young, you just kind of play free. But as you get into middle school, high school, especially college, I mean, everyone's super talented. So I think the mental side is arguably more important. And that's why we get so many questions about that from parents. But those are helpful tips. Okay, I guess one of the last questions, kind of like a cheesy one, just to mirror our name, but we always like to ask this. What do you think is one thing over the course of your career that's helped you untap your potential the most? Whether it was like finding the right trainer or getting on this club team or like learning this one skill. Like what's one thing that you think put you over the edge compared to your peers? Obviously like the natural talent's probably there, but in terms of like giving you that edge, what's the one thing that's helped you the most over the years?
It's a good question. I think consistency. When I was in middle school and high school, I was never like a top player. I've been an underdog for a majority of my career, even when I went to school. I think if you're not like a top player, I think that's totally fine. You don't want to peak early again. But I also think being okay with like working behind the scenes and grinding out things when it's hard is learning how to do that is very important, and will set you up for success not just in your athletic career but also your professional career. Learning how to like work really hard without anyone having to like give you compliments or have anyone watching is super important as well, because you have to learn how to do those things for yourself and not for to just please others, please your parents, please your coaches, because then you're not going to want to play the sport. So I definitely think consistency was a big thing for me because I wasn't good right away, and I still like am learning now. There's still things that I really need to work on. So it's just kind of always being hungry, I would say. Never being satisfied is something that definitely helped me get to where I am today.
And is that just to go on that, is that just like your natural competitiveness, or do you feel like it's more of a, I've heard some athletes say it's like the fear of losing that drives me. Like where do you get that natural hunger from?
I definitely think I'm a very competitive person. I don't think it stems from a fear of losing type of thing because I think that puts too much pressure on me. I think it's more I want to do the best I can for myself and for my teammates and be like a pinpoint on the field for people to look to. That's a big thing for me. Yeah, it's definitely, I think that the fear of losing is a fine mindset to have, but it's not one that I use to motivate myself. So it's definitely like an internal drive that I have. I'm a middle child and my brother played sports. So I've like had that competitive piece to me since I like grew up,
Okay,
always trying to win, do those things. So I think it is definitely a part of my personality, but I think you can grow in that aspect too.
that's funny. My wife and I have two young boys, 2 years old and 7 months old, and we'll probably have a third. But I'm always wondering how the dynamics are going to work out. So you think the middle child is always like the feisty one, trying to prove something?
Yeah.
That's funny. I'll look out for that in the coming years. Okay, I guess the last question. I know parents, sports they love, they want kids to succeed in that. The one thing that maybe gets overlooked nowadays from like a training and like improvement standpoint is the academic side of things. So how do you think kids should focus or like really split their time coming up? Is it like it was when we were growing up where parents always said like you have to get straight A's or 4.0 and a point like kind of in addition to playing school or to playing sports, or where do you think academics falls nowadays for kids? Like, was that a huge part of your recruiting process in getting into college, or was it like, I know I'm a good soccer player, maybe I don't love school, I did what I had to do, but soccer ultimately got to me where I wanted to be? Because I think a lot of parents ultimately it's an investment for them, I guess either way, whether you're paying for high level academics or like paying so much because travel sports are expensive nowadays. So to parents, is it like trying to strike a balance, or do you feel like you can sort of put more eggs in the sports basket and just do what you have to do with academics?
I think you want to find a balance. I think I went to a very competitive high school, and so academics has always been a very, very important part of my life. I think learning how to balance both athletics and academics is helpful once you get to college, but I also think you can use academics as a crutch to get into the school that you want to get into. I was a walk-on, like a preferred walk-on when I went to USC, and so I still got help in the admissions process, but they didn't really have to like do too much work with me just because my grades were pretty consistent. And so I think it can set you apart from other players in the way that they don't have to offer you as much help as possibly another player who doesn't have great grades, and that's just like another positive that can be about you as a player. But when you get to college, I mean, I think there is more of a focus on athletics, but I think you see the top performing teams, and all of them are high academic universities.
Yeah.
So I do think there is a correlation between being able to balance academics and athletics. And I think you learn time management. There's so many things that you learn having to balance those two. So I do think not just like putting athletics in front and putting all your eggs in one basket is a good idea, because if something doesn't work out, you get injured, you don't have anything to fall back on if you're not working hard on the academic side. So it's good to balance both, I would say.
I don't know. The landscape has changed so much, even since I was in high school, and obviously you're like younger than me and coming now, and I'm sure parents who have kids that are training, they went to high school way before us. What is the main focus now talking to college athletes? I think a lot of parents would love to hear this. Is it, hey, you got to have a certain GPA and a certain SAT score, or do college coaches not really care as much about ACTs anymore because it's not required by every school? Like, I know that's always changing, but like when you were talking to college coaches, a couple of years ago, what was their main focus academically? Like, Hannah's got solid what scores, and then that's fine for me. I can recruit her.
I think it's just GPA. You don't need to have a 4.0, but I think that being able to prove that you can handle yourself at a high academic university is important. There are other schools, like Ivy League, you have to have a certain score. That's just the way it works. But when I was going through recruiting, it was COVID, so most of the schools that I was looking at were test optional, so that wasn't really an issue for me.
Okay.
And I know now that some schools remain test optional. It depends on what type of school you want to go to. D3 is obviously, most of them are much more academically rigorous, and they can't really help you in the admissions process. Most of the time you have to get in on your own. But like if you're looking to play D1 and you have the talent to play D1, you just want to have consistent grades that are good enough to get by their like check process, which is something that they do to make sure that you can handle yourself at the university. But I would always aim higher. There's nothing wrong with pushing to have a really high GPA, because it only just sets you apart more from your peers.
Yeah, it's like a tool in the recruiting process. It's never going to be a hindrance to have a better one, and it's your overall profile. I guess it sounds like is what you're saying. Like, you can't just be a stud player. You have to have the personality, the drive, academics, and athletics. And when coaches see that, that full background, it's like, oh, it's a no-brainer. But if you don't have one of those,
Yeah.
especially the academics, I'm sure it would be like, can we find somebody who's a little bit better because their grades aren't there? So it's kind of like a weighted scale almost.
Yeah, I also think it depends on where you want to go. I do think there's schools that don't value academics as much, but I think if you want to be at a school that help you go into a well-rounded person after you finish your sport, then you should definitely be looking at programs that focus on like who you are as a person, academics and athletics, because then it's not like a business transaction. It's like they're helping you grow as a human being instead of just like we're using you for the 4 years you're here and then we don't care.
Yeah.
So I think it's just finding your preference for where you want to play or what type of coach you want to play for, how close your team is. There's so many factors that go into like how you fit into a college program. So I think making sure that you're thinking about those things when you're going through the recruiting process or even before your recruiting process starts is very fundamental to actually finding a school that you fit at and you feel like you mesh with the girls or the coaches.
And do you feel like having played college sports, you're set up really well for life beyond college? Like, is it a plus that you've had so much going on in college, busy schedule, sports, academics, social life, that like beyond college you'll have an easier time getting a job or building a life because you've put in so much work and you've kind of like built yourself up as a person? I guess you have like good standing. Do you think that's a thing that parents who are wondering, is it worth it to have my kid go through all of this when they're young just to play college sports? And then what? Like they can't make money as a pro, but like, do you think that everything you've learned along the way will help you beyond this?
I think that it's an incredibly, just being a college athlete helps you learn so many different things. So I would say yes, I feel very prepared for life after college because I think there are traits that you learn when you're playing that really do set you apart from your peers. And obviously there's things that the peers that don't play sports have probably above you, but I think you can always learn tools when you go into the professional setting. Your office can teach you different things, but they can't teach you how to be a team player. They can't teach you how to be a leader. They can't teach you like how to work hard and all those things, which are three things I think you learn when you're playing a Division I sport or just a college sport in general.
Definitely.
I think if you don't use your time wisely when you're in college to learn the different things, then you can fall behind. I just think if you do choose to play a college sport, you want to take advantage of all the opportunities you have, so then you're best prepared. But I do think it's a life-changing experience that definitely sets you up well for the future.
I love that. Honestly, we've talked to a couple of coaches, but I think you have such a good perspective on what it's like to play in college, and I can't wait to share this because I think a lot of people, like young athletes, parents, and coaches, are going to want to hear this and honestly get a lot of good tips from it. So thanks for sharing everything. We appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be on.